I want to speak to you this morning about leaving the valley of depression. I've called this message Enough, Leaving the Valley of Depression. And when I say depression, I don't mean a medical condition, where you might need professional help, but I think we all know these times where we feel really low and actually things have been going good, but then a couple of things happen, like you get into negative thinking patterns, suddenly you feel alone, you feel low, you feel like the whole world's against you, you feel God's against you, and you wonder, what happened to me? I don't know how I got to this point, but I know for sure I want to get out. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. And I just want to start with a short illustration. This morning, a couple of people asked me, so how are you after all of the groups gone? Most of you've heard already, like the last 12 days, we had a group here of 150 young people, and it was the biggest group that we ever brought to the island. So really a great success story. I think we preached the gospel to more than 10,000 of people. We had all the media in Germany and Switzerland covering it on TV and newspaper. So great success story. Some evenings we were walking down to the beach and there were people out of the crowd and we baptized them in the water. They were ready for that. One of my favorite stories was, there was a guy and we found him drunk in Arenal last year, and some of our guys talked to him about Jesus, and then he completely changed his life. No more alcohol, no more drugs, and now he joined our group. He was sitting here in your church and was part of our group sharing about his experiences. There was this other guy, he was approached by one of our young guys, and they prayed for him, and then he took one of these Miracle Mallorca leaflets to his hotel. He read through it. He said he sat there for half an hour all by himself in his hotel room and gave his life to Jesus. Next day he came, told us about it. The evening after that he was baptized and was there with us when we were doing our reflection time. He was just sharing, he himself, the story. So tremendous things happened. This year was the first time, we were able to connect with all the Spanish churches that are here on the island. And we had this day last Saturday, downtown Palma, in a Center Cristea. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. And it was the first time, we were able to connect with the church and dozens of those people that were there in the evening. So everything was really going great. And now if you ask me this morning, so how was your last week? To be honest, after they're all gone, I usually hit a low. It's like the adrenaline leaves your body. The 150 excited people are gone. No more worship times, in the morning where the room's just exploding with excitement. And you're just sitting there. And to be honest, I don't know if I can confess that. I don't like the heat. I don't understand anyone who sits at the beach at 2 p.m. in the sun. I just hate it. I'd even rather go on the mountain and hike in the middle of the sun than sit there. So I kind of don't know what to do with myself. So there's this tremendous high that you experience. And the days afterwards, it really feels like you're going down into a valley. Everything seems so mundane. Everything seems boring. And there's another thing, I don't know if you heard about that. We want to start a school here in Mallorca next April, like a 5 months international training school. And so we're raising money for that. We're trying to look for buildings for that. We're looking for students. We're looking for workers. And that on top of everything we do. And you would think, if you just made such a great faith experience like we did with Reach Mallorca Outreach, you would think that faith carries over into what you're planning to do now, and that you would just live off those great results and experiences with God. But actually, you get to this point very quickly where you forget everything that just happened 2 days ago, and you're at the same point where you say, oh, is this going to work? Where's the money going to come from? Is anybody going to join the school? How are we going to do this with the children? It's like a cloud, and you can get completely lost and absorbed by your own worries and doubts, and it pulls you down. And so sometimes our greatest low moments we experience just right after everything was going great. And those are stories out of my context, but it might be the same with you. Like your relationship, everything's going great. You've been praying for something for a long time and God answered that prayer. Like you might have experienced a pay rise or your financial problems are solved. Finally, you got over that sickness, so life's good again. And then suddenly it hits you, and sometimes you don't even know why, but it seems like you're just taking a downhill journey from these great moments of excitement and seeing God move, and suddenly you find yourself in the valley. Can you relate to that? The good thing is that there is a story in the Bible where really a man of God, where you would think, my goodness, he experienced God's power like anyone else. And he just went through the same motion. And I just want to look at that story with you this morning and just see if we can learn something. You find it in 1 Kings chapter 19, and the man's called Elijah. The man's called Elijah. Let me read out a couple of verses to you, and then I'll just explain as the story unfolds. So, just to give you a little bit of context, Elijah had just experienced the greatest miracle in his life. There was a big showdown on the mountain of Carmel. The whole nation of Israel that he was a part of had really fallen away from God, and they were following, like an idol called Baal, and this idol had many different priests, and actually the government, the people in power, had also fallen away from God. Their names were Ahab and Jezebel. And so Elijah had called the whole nation up on the mountain, and then he put a challenge in front of the prophets of Baal, and he said, okay, you pray to your God, I pray to my God, and the God that answers with fire, that's the true God. I mean, can you imagine, what a scenario. Actually, a couple of years ago, I was with a youth group. I was at Speaker's Corner in England, in London. And, this is a place where every Sunday afternoon, Muslims debate Christians. So you have hundreds of people there and people arguing with each other about Jesus and about the Quran and Bible and so on. And there was this youth pastor with us, and he got into an argument with one of the Muslim clerics. And he got so emotional, he said, okay, you take the Quran and put it on the ground. Very bad idea. I take the Bible and we put it on the ground, and the God that answers with fire here and now, that is the true God. And the youth group, they came and they said, please rescue our youth pastor. He's about to do something really crazy. I mean, honestly, I didn't have the faith, that fire would fall from heaven and consume the Bible or the Quran. And I even didn't understand what should happen for God to prove that he's the real God, if he should consume the Quran or the Bible. I was not sure. I didn't have the faith, but Elijah, that's what he did. And what? God sent fire. And there was a national revival, like the whole nation turned back to God. I mean, just put yourself into his shoes for a moment. Just imagine you are that person, that puts up that test, prays, fire comes from heaven, and because of what you did, a whole nation turns back to God. I mean, you should think that really boosts your faith. And now, look what happens the same evening. Now, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. That's part of the story. He killed the prophets of Baal. Then Jezebel, she was really something. If you have that woman as your wife, you don't need enemies. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and even more, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Elijah, even if it's the last thing that I do in my life, I will go, I will find you, and I will kill you. Who knows which movie has that quote? I will find you and I will kill you. Taken, yes. Good man. So Jezebel, she says, I will find you and I will kill you. And then something happens with this great hero of faith. Look what it says here in verse 3. And he was afraid, and he arose, and he ran for his life. And he came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went days' journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree. Never heard that term before. And he requested for himself that he might die and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take my life, for I'm not better than my fathers. What's happening with this man? He just experienced the greatest success of his life, God showing how mighty he is. And now, just because this one woman says, I'll go after you, he falls into a depression. He runs away like a chicken, runs into the desert and says, God, take my life. I want to die. It's enough. Somehow, he fell from tremendous heights to tremendous lows. And sometimes that can happen in our life, and I'm just looking at the conversation that Elijah has with God, and have a look at some of those quotes, and just do some soul searching. If you find that in your own heart, sometimes if you fall into depressions for no reason, maybe sometimes even, it says here, I have enough. I cannot take it anymore. That's verse 4. He runs away. He's frustrated with himself. Look here, verse 4, he says, I'm not better than my fathers. Maybe there was a little bit of arrogance in Elijah's heart. Maybe he thought that he was really better than his fathers, that he was really somebody that God could use, like a stable person. And now when he hits reality, he realizes, oh, maybe there's not so much substance within me as I thought. Frustration with himself. Then if you look at verse 10, that's very interesting. It says, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars and killed your prophets with the sword. And now look what he says, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Does that happen to you sometimes? You think I'm the only one that's left. I'm the only one that's serving you. I'm the only one that sees things as they really are. All the others are wrong. If only they could see, my heart and my intentions and how great I am. At the end of the conversation, God says to him, hey, Elijah, by the way, there are a couple of thousands who have not bowed their knees before Baal. You're not alone. But if we are in this valley of depression, all that comes out of our hearts. I cannot take it anymore. I'd rather die. I gave everything for you, and now look where I am. I'm the only one that's serious about you. I thought I was better than the rest, and there we sit. And what it says here is Elijah, he runs away. And he even sends his servant away. He sits alone in the desert. If we are in a depressed state, like many of us, we have the tendency to self-isolate. We don't want to see anyone. We don't want to hear anyone. We try to withdraw into our own inner chamber, because nobody understands me anyway. And that's the worst thing you can do. If you're hitting a low in your life, the worst thing that you can do is withdraw from everyone. And that's exactly what he does. He sits in the desert. Desert, if you've ever been to the Middle East, it's a really dry and hot place. Don't think that the heat here in Mallorca is comparable. And what I find so lovely is how God deals with Elijah in this valley. And I want to share with you 4 steps how God restores Elijah in his moments of fear, panic, self-isolation, and self-pity. God deals so gently with Elijah. And that's the way he wants to deal with you. But please don't confuse God with people. You might think now when I share this, oh, I wish that my partner, I wish that my friends would deal with me like God does, like that they would understand me the same way. Don't think like that. They're human. God is God, They carry their own load. Okay, so how does God approach him? In verse 5, we read, he lay down and slept under a juniper tree. So depression makes you tired. The only thing that Elijah is able to do is sleep. And behold, there was an angel touching him, and he said to him, arise and eat. No questions asked, no confrontation, no, hey, Elijah, what's going on in your life? Why are you a person of so little faith? Didn't you just experience God's power? Just Elijah, arise and eat. Then he looked, and behold, there was at his head a bread cake baked on hot stones. I don't know if this was Elijah's favorite food. Sometimes a cappuccino can work wonders. And a jar of water. So he ate and drank, and then look what happens. And he lay down again and slept some more. The angel of the Lord came again a second time, touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of the food. I've called this first phase of the restoration of Elijah, I've called it simply the strengthening. So God sees Elijah and he knows he's absolutely not in the state of soul searching or of answering difficult questions or reflecting on his own behavior. The guy's just dead tired. He's depressed. And if you're in low moments, you realize you need a lot of sleep. Your mind, your brain, your body needs a lot of sleep. And so God comes to him, and the only thing he says to him is, eat something, and he lets him sleep again. Sometimes with a cranky person, that's the best thing you can do. Just let that person eat and sleep. And, when I think about that, sleeping can also be a mechanism. That's something you withdraw to. And I just want you to reflect for a second, what are you withdrawing to when you are in a low state mentally, emotionally? For some of us, it's just sleeping. For others, it's watching Netflix, one series after the next. For others, it's alcohol. That's just what you withdraw to if you're in a bad mood. Or it's, it's taking drugs, it's pornography, it's going shopping. I don't know what it is in your life, but we all have this exit strategy. If we don't want to deal with our situation, if we're too weak for it, we withdraw to something. And, and here what I see with God is, he lets Elijah sleep, he serves him, and he waits until Elijah is approachable again. And sometimes God does that with us. We withdraw to our little corners, to our habits, and he lets us do that as long as we want to. It helps us a little bit. It gives us a little bit of satisfaction in those moments, but we all realize if we withdraw to these things, they don't really help us out for good. They don't really get us over the top. They don't get us back on the mountain. But God, in his patience, he waits there, he serves them again, he gives them food again, he lets us sit there as long as we need it, and he's waiting for us to gain enough strength, even if we sometimes gain it in unhealthy ways, until he can have a real conversation with us. And then it starts, verse 9, and I've called that the conversation. So after God strengthens us a little bit, lets us sleep, lets us eat, lets us withdraw to the things we kind of do in order to feel better, that don't really help us. Now he starts a conversation with Elijah, and I love that. It reminds me a little bit of the story of Adam and Eve, verse 9. Then he came there to a cave and lodged there. So Elijah finds a cave, starts to live there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. Now God starts to speak to him directly. He speaks in his life, and he says to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And whenever God asks a question, you can be sure of one thing. He doesn't need the information you will give him. He knows. When God asks you a question, it's about helping you to self-reflect on your condition. It's like, it's like God looking down on Elijah sitting in the cave, and it says, Elijah, what are you doing here? You're in the midst of the desert. How did you end up here? Why are you sitting here in a cave? I've called you to Israel to talk to the king and lead a national revival. That's your job. And you're sitting here in a cave pitying yourself. What are you doing here, Elijah? It's a similar question that God asked Adam and Eve. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 9, he asks Adam and Eve, where are you? It's not like God entering, like the Garden of Eden and saying, hey, Adam, Eve, I've been looking for you for the whole day. Where are you hiding? I can't find you. Can you raise your hand, or can you just beep? It's when God asks, where are you? It's like, Adam and Eve, what happened to you? Where are you spiritually? Where are you emotionally? What's going on in your life? And what follows now is an emotional outburst. I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So it all bursts out of Elijah. And sometimes I think just to throw it all out, to let it all come out, all your raw emotions, that's part of the therapy. Have you ever wondered why there are psalms in the Bible where David prays, oh God, take the babies of the Philistines and hit them against the rocks? It's in the Bible. And you just wonder, God, is this part of salvation history? Should I form a doctrine out of this? Why did you allow for this to be in the Bible? Taking the babies of Philistines and hit them against the rocks. Why did God consider it important for that to be in the Bible? You know why? Because it was the honest state of heart of David. That's not an instruction to do that. That's not reflecting on the character of God. But that is how David felt. That what was genuinely going on inside of him. And God, he sees us as partners. We are the crown of his creation. We're created in his image. And whatever you feel, even if it's unreflected, even if it's not even true, even if it represents distorted reality, he considers it important because it really matters in your heart. It can be completely off, but still it's being recorded. The Psalms are songs, honest soul reflections. God values that. And sometimes the best thing is, when God asks you, hey, where are you? What's going on? That you just pour it all out. God, I feel alone. God, I feel that nobody understands me. God, I'm the only one that's serving you. Sometimes we're afraid to say all these things, because we feel like we're insulting God. But God looks into your heart. He knows what's there anyway. And he can handle it. Your partner cannot handle it sometimes, your friends cannot handle it sometimes, but God can handle it. God is not easily pissed off, or sad, or oh, why did you say that? He looks into your heart, he knows it. And here Elijah, the only thing you should realize about this situation, Elijah feels like that, but it's still not true. He is not alone. He's not the only one left. Our raw emotions, they distort our view on reality. For you, it's real in your heart, but it doesn't mean it's real. But if we're really emotional and depressed, we cannot differentiate between the reality we perceive and what reality really is. And God takes it as raw as it is. And you know what God does is he doesn't argue with Elijah at this point. He just lets it sit there. He says, Elijah, that's how you feel, that's okay. But God knows what Elijah needs, and he knows what you and I need. And what follows now is a personal encounter with God. Look what it says here. So he said, go forth and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord was passing by. So God says, Elijah, I want to meet you personally. God doesn't give him a download of information. He doesn't correct his behavior. He just says, meet me. And that will make all the difference. So he said, go forth and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord was passing by. And now look, a great and strong wind was rending the mountains and breaking in pieces the rocks before the Lord. A great demonstration of power. But then look what it says. But the Lord was not in the wind. I mean, the way Elijah had experienced God just a couple of days earlier was through a great manifestation of power. Fire fell from heaven, and God was in that. And I guess Elijah kind of expected for God to show himself in the same way again, but God was not in that great and strong wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, like the ground, the mountains shake, but God was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And behold, a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? So God shows up. But he doesn't show up like Elijah expects it. But God shows up in gentleness. And usually when we are in these depressions and these low moments, we don't need a great demonstration of power. To watch somebody getting healed spectacularly will not get you out of the depression. What you need to experience is deep, deep down in your heart, the gentle voice of God. Like when everything out there is so chaotic and great and spectacular and in a sense out of order. What you need is you need to experience God deep down in your heart. He needs to speak peace to the very depth of your being. And that is what Elijah experiences. It's an encounter with God, and he hides his face. I want to show you one verse in the New Testament. We find this in 2 Corinthians 3:18. And this is one of the key verses when it comes to change, how we all change. I'll read from verse 17 and then focus on verse 18. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And now listen to that. But we all, with unveiled faces. Remember, in the Old Testament, even Moses, he had to cover his face. Like when people in the Old Testament encountered God, they had to cover their face because otherwise they would die in the presence of God. And now it says we that are in Jesus, with unveiled faces, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord the Spirit. So what does it say here is the transformation of who we are. From sad people to happy people, from caught up people into free people, from lazy people into people that are about God's mission, from people bound in sin that are living a life, that's free of all of that. That happens not through you trying harder and work yourself out of the depression and following 5 steps to a better life, but it happens in an encounter with Jesus. And here it says, if you look at Jesus, with an unveiled face, if you encounter him, it transforms your life. It's not something you do initially, it's something that's being done to you. Being close to that person, looking at that person, that's causing the transformation. It enables you to follow all the good steps that we are being advised in the Bible. And God knows that. So what happens with Elijah, it's an encounter. And suddenly, God asks that question again, Elijah, where are you? And the answer of Elijah, it changes accordingly because now he has encountered God. So it begins with a pure strengthening, What follows is a conversation where Elijah pours his heart out, and then there is an encounter, a life-transforming encounter with God. And look what follows now, and I really love this about God. God's ultimate goal is not to restore you to emotional health. That's usually where we stop in the church. That's where we stop, so we're in a bad place, and we ask Jesus to get us to a better place. And if we're there, we're happy Christians. But that's not where the story ends, and that's not what Jesus has as an ultimate goal for us. What God has for Elijah is a mission. He's not restoring Elijah just to emotional health. He's restoring him to the mission that he's commanded him to. Look how this story continues. Here, verse 14. Then he said, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Now after, and only after, God encountered Elijah, look what he says to him. Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you have arrived, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to come to that in a second. Here's one thing I note about the text. Elijah, all the way that he went into the desert, 24 hours, he has to walk back. Sometimes, in those low moments, we make very bad choices. We run away physically and in our hearts, and on the way we hurt people and everything. And so, even though God restores Elijah, he has to walk back the same path he came. Every step he went, he has to walk back. He could have saved himself that trouble, God says, I've not forgotten about the mission. Just because you're experiencing a low and you're self-pitying yourself, I still have something to do for you. It's important, it matters. Ultimately, it's about me and my kingdom and not about your emotions. Go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you have arrived, you shall anoint Hazael king over Aram, and Jehu the son of Nimshi she shall anoint king over Israel, and Elijah the son of Shaphat of Abel Meholah you shall anoint as prophet in your place. My goodness, God says, hey look, I want you to go to 3 different places, I want you to anoint 3 different kings, and I just want you to do the work that needs to be done. He's recommissioning Elijah for the job that God has for him. Look, if you are going through these low moments, that's okay. As I said, God takes you where you're at. But please don't forget, in the meantime, the things that God has called you to do, they're not being done. You stop being a father and a husband or a wife as long as you are experiencing your lows. You're not preaching the gospel to your neighbors because you feel so bad about yourself. So the devil has been very successful in taking you off mission. And those people, they don't hear the gospel because you're going through this. God might have even put a calling on your life to take the next step into something that he wants you to do. But you're standing there and you're not moving because you're going through all of this. And I'm not talking about the stage where you're still too weak to even think about things. Those 4 stages in the life of Elijah, sometimes they take certain periods of time. It's not sometimes all within one day that these things happen. But please be aware that as long as you're granting yourself your vacation from God, there's still a mission that needs to be done. And God, it's not that God needs you, but he wants to use you. And he's put you into a unique context to serve him, to serve other people. So what I want to ask you to finish off this message today is, if you do some honest reflection, which stage are you in at the moment? If you find yourself in an emotional or spiritual low, what stage are you in? And my challenge to you is, maybe take one step further today. Look, if you are completely overwhelmed with anxiety and fear, and you're too tired, you just want to sleep, you're completely withdrawn, then I want you to know that God wants to meet you there. He understands you. He respects your feelings. He loves you. He wants to meet your needs. It's not about what you need to do tomorrow. He wants to meet you there. And the next step for you today, it would be to consider that maybe God is saying, hey, where are you? Can I talk to you? Are you able to tell me where you're at? I want to know. I care about your emotions. I don't care if they're reflected or not. I want to hear from you. And just talking to God like that, it will help you out. Maybe you've been in that stage for a long time, the complaining stage, the pouring it all out to God. And maybe God is asking you today, are you ready for an encounter? I mean, do you really want to encounter me? It's funny, like in John 5, there's this story where this man, 38 years, he's sitting at the Teich. I don't know what that's in English. The pool of Bethesda. And Jesus asks him, do you actually want to be healed? And that's sometimes a good question, like sometimes our suffering becomes so much a part of our identity, and we experience the pity of other people. Sometimes we even experience, like how our financial needs are being met. And it's an interesting question to answer, like, do I actually want to be healthy again? Do I want to get out of that state? Because it would mean that I have to take responsibility for my life. So it's God maybe asking you, like, are you ready for an encounter? Do you want me to meet you? Do you want to experience my presence? Do you want to be transformed? And then to say, yes, I'll stop running away. I'll stop hiding like Adam and Eve. I want that. Maybe that's your step today. And maybe you're realizing you're reaching the end of the tunnel and you're just coming back to a life where you feel like you're on your both feet. And you feel like, I could enjoy that phase for a lot longer. And it's God saying to you today, hey, could I actually start talking to you again about what I really want to do with your life? Could I start talking to you about the mission I have for your life? Would you be willing to listen? Would you be able to embrace that anew? And then it's also good if you give an answer to Jesus. Maybe I can ask the worship team to come up and we'll just enter one or two songs, and maybe you can make that time about reflecting what God's doing in your life at the moment and giving him an answer. Let's get up with each other. Let's rise. As you enter this room with your presence, maybe just invite him into your life. Maybe you can say, God, speak to me this morning. Holy Spirit, please come. I want to speak over you that God sees you where you're at this morning. And if you feel that you're burdened and that you're heavily loaded, why don't you just start talking to Jesus right now? Why don't you start pouring your heart out? Raise your voice. Bring him your frustrations. Bring him your fears. Bring him your state of mind. Pour your heart out. Don't see this as the end of the service, 2 more songs and we're ready for coffee. See this as a holy moment. God is really here to encounter you. That's the reason why we go to church, because we believe that Jesus is present and that miracles happen when he's here. Father, you hear those prayers that are being offered to you right now. Thank you, Jesus, that you can handle our raw emotions and our unreflected thoughts, and you can deal with that. And I pray as you are speaking to God, as you're releasing your frustrations and your fears, I pray that the peace of God will settle on you. Come, Jesus. Transform us into your image. Be that gentle wind in our midst. Be that gentle whisper to this morning. Jesus, we want to listen to you. We're so hungry to encounter you. We don't want to hear about you, God. We want to meet with you. We want to see you face to face, God. We want your presence to transform us. God, we're praying like Moses. There's nothing that makes us any different from all other religions and people of this world if you are not with us, if you're not in our midst, if we're not encountering you. Heal broken hearts this morning, God. Renew visions, renew commissions, Jesus. We don't want to do this without you, God.